Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and this is Educational Television Channel 23 coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock, New York, and also from Let's Live with Thurman Greco on YouTube. And we are very excited this evening because we've been waiting a long time for this guest. And it's a very timely visit because we have an election coming up. And who do we have? Can you tell everybody?
Yes, I am Sarahana Shrestha, and I just won the Democratic primary for State Assembly. So I'm going to be on the ballot on both the Democrat line as well as the Working Families Party line. And you can vote for me by November 8th.
That's just right up there, isn't it?
Yes.
So is this the first time that you have run for office?
Yes, it is the first time I've run for office. I have worked on somebody else's campaign before in the same sort of style of campaigning, grassroots, knocking doors, talking to people one-on-one. But this is the first time I ran for office, and I talked about this during the primary a little bit, but I ran sort of as a last-minute decision because I felt a sense of urgency. So it was not something that I had planned for a long time. But we, through the course of campaigning, I think that our entire team, there's so many my fellow organizers who are involved in this campaign. And I really think we've become experts at running campaigns. We become advanced campaigners.
You started off with you were beginners, and
yes.
Then you were intermediates, and now you're advanced.
Yes, we've become pros at campaigning. We knock out a lot of doors. We know what messaging, from our platform works the best. We know how to read people, because a lot of the times people won't reveal right away what they're really thinking, but it's really become a study of people when you go to the door and you're trying to gauge what issues might motivate this person, A, to talk to you, and B, to vote. So I think we've really become good at that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Do you give classes to your volunteers?
We actually, because we need to constantly grow and constantly refresh people, because having volunteers means that they may be able to come to a shift and they may not be able to come to another shift. So we try to have a reliable base of people. And since winning the primary, so what we do is at the beginning of every shift, we make sure somebody who's showing up for the first time feels comfortable. So we give them, pretty in-depth training. We have them, tag along with people who've done it before. And then, after they've shown up for a few shifts, they also become intermediate. Then they also become pros. So for us, it's very important because we are relying on people's free time, that everybody feels like they know what they're doing, and we have provided as much support as we can. And yeah, that seems to be working pretty well.
Where do you find your people? How do you find them?
Yeah, so we started out, so I organized with Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, and we started out with just, I want to say, around 8 people who were there from the beginning when we were discussing, should we run a campaign? Like, is it too ambitious? Can we even do this? But we went into it having some faith that if we put ourselves out there, that if we inspire people, we can find new people to join. We use social media a lot to get people interested. We have a lot of fun, knocking doors, making calls. We have a lot of fun. We have a great time. And a lot of us have made very close friends through this campaign. And we really try to make that come across in the social media. And many people have said that they signed up for something because it looked really fun, that we were having a good time, and we do. And then the other thing is, knocking doors, you also meet people who want to volunteer. Sometimes they're so excited, they're like, how can I join? And so we have some of those people as well. Some of the people that voted for me in the primary are now volunteers, So, but I have to say that it does not happen easily or by magic. Even when somebody is very interested, it takes a lot of following up, a lot of checking in for them to actually show up and then to come back, So as a grassroots campaign, we really have two things that we focus on a day-to-day basis. One is, do we have money, right? And really, money for us is a second priority. We only panic when it's running low, but otherwise we're okay with, if we have a little bit, we usually just sit on it. But the thing that we really worry about day to day is, do we have enough volunteers coming to each shift? Are we knocking enough doors? Are we making enough phone calls? So that's our bread and butter. Morning to night, we're talking about how many people signed up for which shift, what kind of pushes we need to make to, get people to come to a particular shift. So that's how we spend 80% of our time, is just making sure volunteers are showing up.
Well, the thing that impressed me so much about you is the fact that you're not a politician.
Mm-hmm.
So as you found volunteers, they weren't politicians either.
Right.
So you are a group of activists.
Yeah.
Which means that you have some kind of, I want to say integrity, but you have a core.
Right.
You have a core. You have some beliefs. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, just yesterday we had a phone bank, and one of our volunteers, we have a chat, where we talk about how our calls are going. And one of our volunteers shared that they got a person in Kingston who is still undecided, but they said that even though I am so undecided, they were really impressed with how passionate everyone from our campaign was every time they heard from us. And that really comes across, because the truth is that a paid canvasser is never going to be that passionate.
That's right.
Maybe if it's already a volunteer who gets hired, maybe that could be different. But the fact that people are putting in their time, taking time out of their busy schedules to volunteer for something, means that they are very invested in it.
Yes.
They're doing it because they absolutely believe in it. And that really gives us an extra edge, because every single volunteer we have is very invested. And some of them have been with us since November of last year. And so it's almost going to be a year that they've stuck with us. It's putting a year of your life into a campaign but that's why I said earlier that people have also formed strong friendships. Like when we are canvassing, when we're hanging out, the relationship that I have with my team is not necessarily like a candidate to volunteer. It's friends. We're all friends. We're fellow organizers. I have expectations of them as organizers. I'm not necessarily babying them or thanking them endlessly, because they are doing something that they want to do, and they are taking ownership of it. They're doing a great job at it. So I really think of it as like, we're a collective body, so and I think we fit in really well, because we are very aligned on why we're doing this. And you have to be aligned to be doing it for so long. And some of the new volunteers that have joined since I won the primary, they've been showing up almost every day in some instances, so it does take a lot of conviction to do that.
Well, and you have to, in your case, I think your volunteers believe in they have some core beliefs.
Right.
What are they?
Well, one is that we deserve better. And two is that nobody's going to necessarily just hand it to us. We have to demand it, so we know. So it's a 1 and a 2. One is optimistic. We know we can do better, right? That's a place of hope. The 2 is we also know that we need to work to demand it. I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way,
Well, I think it should be that way, because if you demand something, you're letting the world know what your needs are.
Right.
And how can you fulfill those needs if people don't even know you need them?
Right.
You have them.
Yeah. Some of the things that we are demanding, I think they're a little too basic. And the thing is, the people who need those things the most usually don't have the time to volunteer, to organize, because they're busy maybe working 2 jobs, looking after 3 children or whatever it is. So eventually we do hope that we reach a place where some of the things that we're demanding are fulfilled and built into our system so that it's not a struggle every time, you know. And I think that right now one thing that people are feeling is that nothing can be taken for granted, that rights that we won a long time ago can still be threatened.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's why it's really important to organize, because nothing is safe. You know, you have to the reality is you have to constantly fight for it. And the other thing is, you know, our district is technically supposed to be a safe-ish district, just because there are very few Republicans and conservatives in our district. However, we also have a lot of voters who are not affiliated with any party, who go by just what feels right to them. There's a huge group of voters that are unaffiliated and think of themselves as independent. But the reason that we are working so hard trying to reach as many of them as possible is we don't want them to just vote. We want them to understand what we are working towards. And we want them to understand that when we win, we're not disappearing. We're gonna be around and back, because we're in it for the long haul. You know, we're in it for the long-term goals. And even, you know, talking to a few people at the door, you see the work that the conversation starts to do. You know, maybe people will start at one position. For example, I've run into a few people who've been ready to shut the door on me because they don't believe in voting anymore. But even after 5 minutes of talking, they've changed their mind. They're going to consider it, you know, and that's the potential for organizing. Those are the kind of people that we need to bring into the fold and show them what the options are, and show them that we are serious about trying to make change, because, you know, a lot of people are tired of everything being the same, you know, as far as they're concerned. They think that year after year it's all the same, their life is still difficult. And I have found the difference between, you know, door knocking for the general election and door knocking for the primary election is exactly that. Primary voters are eager to vote, they like voting, they like engaging with politics. But in general election, the challenge is many voters are just very disengaged. They're busy with their lives. They don't have necessarily the time to follow everything that's going on, especially at the local level. So what we've been trying to do is, because, you know, like I said, our bread and butter is knocking doors, making phone calls. What we've been trying to do is, for example, going to folks who only vote in presidential year, going to them and having a conversation where we can try to convince them to also vote in the midterm, because it is a known problem that the turnout falls off in midterm because there's not as much media coverage, there's not as much money spent, you know, so there's not as much as sort of a narrative created in the less drama, you know, there's less drama in the midterm election. So there's always a drop out in turnout, but we have met also, you know, of course our capacity is limited. I wish we could get to 64,000 people, but obviously we can't. But of the people that we have met that belong to this category, some of them have been very excited to vote in the midterm election for the first time, specifically because of our platform, you know. And to other people who started voting in 2020 because of Trump, and there's a lot of these people too, you know, people who didn't really vote before, but in 2020 voted because people were horrified by Trump. To those types of people, we've been trying to sort of share with them the importance of midterm elections and how local politics does have an upward effect on national politics. If state politics and local politics is strong everywhere, national politics is going to be much more stable and, you know, not have these wild curveballs that we've been seeing recently. So yeah, so we look at every conversation as an opportunity to organize, as an opportunity to bring people into the fold, because if they're isolated, they're in their own bubble, it usually doesn't go where we need them to go, you know. So they need some kind of connection to their democracy so that they feel like they're a part of it, because right now a lot of people don't feel like they're a part of it.
Well, also, this has been an interesting thing for me, because you are a young group and you're a new group, and this is your first time out, and you have made quite a bit of difference. I mean, you know, you have made a difference. But at the same time, this whole area is new. I mean, there are just so many new people living here that you can't, and this is probably good for you because you don't have anything to compare it with. You can't say, well, the voters this year are very different than they were last year. But just simply because the names are different, the people are different. They lived somewhere else last year. They didn't live here.
Well, in our primary race, actually, the women over 50 were the largest voting bloc. They really dictated that election. And new voters were actually a small part of the picture. And the reason is, you know, one simple reason is when you run a primary race, you have very limited capacity. So you go back to people who usually vote in the primaries. That means you're going back to actually voters who are already voting here, you know. But then at the same time, our race is a great race to bring new people in. You know, we did see a number of younger people who voted for the first time in our race who had not voted before. When I was doing grocery the other day, and I had a cashier who was very young, and she recognized me, and she was very excited that she voted for me. You know, so it's good to get young people excited. It's good to get young people excited, and I think, but there is a narrative that I won because too many people from outside have moved here, and the data does not show that. The data shows the reliable women voters, older women voters are the ones who really voted, with, like, you know, with a small group of younger voters. And actually, turning out younger voters, getting them to the polls is very difficult. You know, it's very difficult. They can be excited. We had many people who were excited by us, but they didn't necessarily go to the polls to vote. But we need to change that as well. But you know, this is why I ran, though, because this district historically, if you look at the data of, you know, the last 10 years or so, has voted progressively. And we felt like if the people who live here are progressive, at least in the primary universe, you know, if they're progressive, then the representation should really reflect that, you know, bring some energy, bring some boldness, some strong advocacy. We felt like we could do that. And we won, so I think that assessment was probably correct.
So, as a progressive, what are some important things that you think are going to happen when you win?
Yeah, you know, there's really two things. One is you got to have the right politics, but the second is you also need the work ethic. It's not enough to just have the right politics. You need to be wise and smart about how you're going to get it done, right? So one of the things that I will be putting a lot of my energy into is making sure that I can persuade my colleagues to not give in to pressure from corporations and corporate lobbyists, because they are bullies. You know, they will try to trick you into, or, you know, threaten you into taking positions that serve them. And this happens all the time and everywhere. But convincing your colleagues to stand up to to stand up to these corporate interests also takes organizing work, building relationship with them, convincing them why it's worth it to pass a certain bill, why that would benefit us. So similar to talking to folks at the doors, you also, inside Albany, also you have to organize people into coming on board with what you want supported. So if we take a stand against corporations and corporate interests, we can pass a lot of what I consider sort of small legislations that would help a lot of people. For example, in the state assembly, and I've been using this example more and more recently because it's a perfect illustration of what I mean. in the state assembly, the bill to lower the cap of insulin cost from $100 to $30 has been stuck in the state assembly. It has not even left the committee. It has not even gone to the floor for a vote. The state senate has passed it, and that's not a broad, ambitious, paradigm shifting bill. That's a very simple bill, but for people who are affected by it, it's huge. If you need to depend on insulin, that's a huge relief to a large number of people, right? So, and there's hundreds of examples of bills of that level. And no matter if it's healthcare, if it's housing, if it's education, if it's climate, it all comes down to the same thing, which is that who is dictating what happens in our economy, and usually it's corporations and corporate lobbyists, private companies with private interests who want subsidies, who don't want competition, So I think that's the main thing I see as like an impact that I would be able to make, is just you can encourage your colleagues to just do the right thing, and maybe people in Albany also need optimism every now and then, a little push, because I imagine it's a place that burns you out very easily. So
Well, and I think because you are an activist, you're going to be a breath of fresh air. That's what I think. I know that when you came to my door, when your representatives came to my door, it was like about 2 sentences, and I was thinking, my, this is different. So that's what has captivated everyone.
Yeah, and once you go inside, you will be inundated with lowering your expectations, being told to make compromises as a default, to play the game. You will be inundated with the pressure to do all those things. So part of it is about who is shaping the narrative of what's possible, right? And there need to be a few people who are sort of holding the line on what's possible, because if there aren't, then everything just shifts to the center, to the right, and this is what's happened in this country is, the center of this country is the right in many other countries, because the line keeps moving.
Yes.
So there needs to be some people who are holding the line on what is possible and what is reasonable and what is right to do for people, because, people invoke FDR a lot. What FDR wanted to do is exactly the things that we are still fighting for, and that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago.
Yes.
And just because I am DSA, people will try to frame those same things as very radical. But the truth is, even back then, it was, accused of being very radical. But if you talk to most people, they support those things. So if most people support it, then it can't be that radical.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just how you frame it.
Yeah, it's how you frame, who owns the story of what's possible,
Well, I think that that's extremely important. I think one of your jobs is to help people cling to what is possible.
Yes.
Because, now in this country, people feel like the options are no longer there.
Right? And, I think one of the most historic things that happened in national politics recently, I do think, was Obama's first campaign. And his entire campaign was about possibility. Regardless of what came after, what he campaigned on was possibility, right? That we can do. I mean, his slogan was, yes, we can. Right? Yes, we can. It doesn't get simpler than that to say, why not? Why not try for things that help people, that make our lives easier? And people, I remember as a young person watching that race and running into, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who were having a conversation amongst each other about why they had to vote in this election. I've never seen that since, where very young people felt like they had to vote, that it was uncool to not vote. And that was because the messaging was, we're going to define what's possible. And I still believe that that is what most people want. And then the people who say, well, that's not possible, are usually the ones lacking imagination, the ones lacking a plan and a commitment, you know. Yeah, I think that we have to claim what's possible.
To work with hope. And of course, that man has lived his whole life on that.
Right.
You know, that's part of his core personality. I remember that I was in Washington, D.C. on that election night, and the night before the vote, he went out into a field in Manassas, and it was an old Civil War battlefield, and it was filled with people.
Right.
Packed. And it was completely silent.
Yeah.
If you can imagine, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and not one word.
Right. Yeah.
And that was his sense of possibility.
Right. Yeah. That's what resonated about that campaign, is the sense of possibility. Yeah. And people still want that. I don't think that people, you know, the reason people have become jaded, the reason people have become cynical, is because they think that, oh, maybe that was just talk. You know, that was just talk. So cynicism is very dangerous.
Yes.
You know, wearing people out is very dangerous, because we need people to be more active, more involved in our democracy if we want to hold people accountable, our systems accountable. So yeah, I think it will be very helpful to have voices in Albany who are talking about what's possible, because there's way too many people who will tell you it's not possible. And in our state right now, we have a veto-proof Democratic supermajority, right? That means if we decide we want to do something, even the governor can't veto it. So why not, right? Why not do something that will help people, especially as we're still dealing with the pandemic, dealing with anxieties, you know, around economic disruptions, around climate change. People are really struggling. And so I think that everybody's hungry for a little bit of hope. And the sort of responsibility I feel is to make sure that people who voted for me and believed in our message of possibility don't feel like I abandon that message once I'm in, you know. So I have to be carrying that message no matter what. It's funny, a lot of people, one of the things that people tell me a lot is don't change once you get elected, which is great. You know, that I love to be told that, because we're on the same page, you know.
Well, I don't believe you are going to change. And that's because you're not a politician. You are an activist, and activists work in very different ways. And when they go into a room, they go through a different door. And so that's one of the things that motivates me, is the fact that I know that if you are chosen for the job, you're going to do that job a certain way.
Right.
Because those are the skills that you have brought to the table.
Right.
And so we need more activists and fewer politicians.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, organizers in office. That's what I
Yes.
say. Yeah.
That really is what
Yeah.
we need.
Yeah, and also because not just the attitude towards certain things, but like I said, also the skills. Because an organizer means that you do know how to bring people on board. You know, I mean, that's how we grew our team, right? Organizing is building personal relationships and bringing people into taking some kind of sustained action. You know, it's not touch and go, it's not showing up and disappearing. You bring people into a sustained course of action, and you do that whether it's inside Albany or outside Albany. But if you've done that outside Albany, it sure helps to be in there. And you know, the other electeds that have run as DSA candidates and have won, that's their skill as well. They are organizers in office. They are building support, constantly doing political education, constantly creating transparency for how things work in Albany. And yeah, I think that's what's needed.
And so it's going to happen.
Yes, it's going to happen in the Hudson Valley too.
That's wonderful. That's totally, totally wonderful. And when you are elected, now where will you live?
Where will I live?
when you are elected?
Same place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're going to commute?
Yeah, so for a state legislature position, most of your time is spent in your district. And the legislature is not in session for most of the year. So you do have to be in Albany when it's in session, and many people who are commuting from far usually will have an apartment or a hotel that they like to use, but this district is not that far from Albany. It is commutable.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But sometimes, when the budget is being passed and discussed, people stay up till 4 a.m. sometimes when the big stuff is happening. So I'm sure there will be overnight stays that you can't avoid, but I am lucky that our district is fairly close to Albany. But yeah, most of the time, the state representatives spend the time in their district.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you face when you are elected?
Well, I think that being new is always intimidating, and as someone who ran in the primary, people will assume a lot of things about you. They will have made up their mind about you, attributed characteristics to you that you don't actually have. So I think that, that's always going to be the case. I have, however, started talking to many sitting assembly members because I wanted to get a head start on letting them know that I'm going to be a completely reasonable, friendly person. I have my values and where I stand, but that doesn't mean that they have to worry about me being, rude to them or, disrespectful to them or whatever. I do want to make sure that I can get along with people, but at the same time, everybody knows where I stand. But, who knows what the challenges are going to be. I think, like I said, I think being on the inside inundates you with pressure to change. I think even people who go into government with very good intentions sometimes do cave into those pressures and do change because, as soon as you're in, people start worrying about re-election. And sometimes people start worrying about re-election too much, and then they forget why you got elected in the first place. Yeah. So I expect, there to be a lot of pressure. But at the same time, I feel pretty good because of the way we ran our race, because of the support that we have. I feel pretty good that I will be able to do a good job of being a voice for what we are trying to represent in Albany.
So, what about your staff? Where is your staff going to be?
So, right now, the assembly office for this district is in Kingston, and it's most likely going to be the same office. Not that I've had this discussion, but that's usually the case. Is because the assembly manages, like which offices and so on. Like I don't necessarily would directly manage. So the office is in Kingston. Unfortunately, there's not enough of a budget in the assembly for multiple offices in this district, even though I actually think that this district is big enough that ideally there should be around 3 offices. Sometimes some representatives do, and also for every representative, it's not a fixed amount you get. So if if you could get lucky negotiating a bigger amount, that's a possibility. Some people have managed multiple offices, but that does mean it comes at the cost of underpaying something else. So you basically choose between, you have to make decisions like, do you want 2 decently paid full-time staff, or do you want part-timers in 2 offices? You have to make decisions like that. But hopefully I'll win in November, and I think it's most likely going to be the same Kingston office.
And you mentioned earlier that you're going to be looking for a grant writer.
Yeah, I think, I think that grant writing is one of the things that's on the table as what's going to be very important.
Oh, I think that's an extremely important.
Yeah, but to be quite honest, my head is so deep into campaigning that even though I have some ideas for what I want the office to look like, I've sort of just bookmarked them and tucked them away just because I don't want to get too worked up thinking about all those things right now. But you know, when our campaign ends on November 8th, my campaign manager will be staying through an extra month to help me sort out, you know, the office and the hiring and so on. In many other races that the primaries happened in, there is not really a Republican challenge, so those folks already have a head start in terms of hiring. But for us, we do have a real race, so I need to win till, you know, I've actually won.
You do have a challenger?
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's exciting. I think that makes you better.
Right, yeah. And to be honest, even if I did not have a challenger, I think I would still do what I'm doing right now because, you know, we started end of August going back to the doors, and these 2 months are, I mean, as a team, we really decided that they are an opportunity to reach more people. So I think even if we didn't have any challenger, we would probably still be running the campaign the same way.
Well, you have to, because you have to meet the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's important, that the people know you.
Exactly, yeah.
That they say, Sarahana came to my house.
Right, yes.
You know, that's
and I want them,
important.
even when somebody says they're voting all Democrats, I still want them to know this name that they're seeing on the ballot, like who is this person? What is the platform? What is the story? You know, I still want them to know. So, and people are excited to know, you know, when I say, oh, I just won there are many people I've met who were not paying attention at all, and I say, oh, I just won the primary, and they're very impressed. You know, they're like, wow, congratulations, and so on. So that's a nice opportunity, because if I get elected and half the people don't even know my story, it's less of a bond, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So
the more doors that you knock on, the more bond that you have with the residents.
Yes.
And I think it's also extremely important now, because it's very important to knock on the doors and remind people that we do have to vote.
right.
That this is a crucial time.
Right.
And of course, every election, people say this, we must.
Right.
But I mean, this time we really, really mean it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
The stakes are getting higher.
there, yes. And the threats are getting worse.
Yes.
So it's very important, especially with the young ones.
Yes. And, you know, some of the talking points coming out of the right, you know, in these races that are happening in this district, you know, the Assembly, the State Senate, the Congress, it's all set up to scare people and to divide people. And that's what we're up against. So, you know, on the left, we really have to make sure that we are committed to policies and changes that's going to make people less suspicious of each other. Because, you know, right now a lot of people do feel like they're just fighting over scraps amongst each other. And there's this sort of artificial scarcity of what is available to us. So, you know, I've talked to people across party lines, from Democrats to Independents to Republican, who agree that the super wealthy are too wealthy and that we are just being left to fight. So, you know, maybe we can be brought together if we know that there's actually enough for us and there are things that we can do to make that materialize. Like, I think healthcare is a great example. If I really felt like if everybody had access to great healthcare, maybe a lot of Republicans would stop being Republicans.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? Because everybody has issues with their healthcare. Everybody thinks the drug prices are too high. Everybody thinks that, you know, the quality of care that they're getting is not ideal. So, yeah, I think that we can bring together people by passing policies that bring people together, by making them feel like they are taken care of and nobody's out to get them, you know.
Well, people feeling like someone is out to get them it's a manufactured thing.
Yeah.
But if you say it enough, after a while, everyone believes it.
Yeah. And the right's whole talking point is making people believe that somebody's out to get them. you
Right.
know? Right.
And you know, New York is such a wonderful, wonderful place. I'm a transplant, and I am here by choice. And I see the options for New York State.
Yeah.
And New York does care about its people, and it does care about its schools, and it does care, it does care.
Right.
But sometimes when people are here in New York State, they don't understand it, or they don't believe it. Maybe they don't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do better in terms of making that care materialize. I think on paper we care. I think people care. Regular people care, and I think on paper the government cares as well. But we need to do better in terms of proving that we care. By the priorities that we set. Because the truth is, public education is really struggling with funding, whether it's lower education or higher education. Teachers are really struggling, right? That's a common story everywhere. Teachers are responsible for too many things that they should not be responsible for. Hospitals are understaffed. There's not really a funding stream that has been sorted out to make sure that a safe number of nurses and care workers have been hired at a hospital. So I guess what I mean is we can't just care. We have to do everything that is in our powers to get us to a position where we have solved that problem. And I think that we need to remind, somebody needs to be very persistent about reminding everyone about these priorities, because on paper care is not gonna solve anything on its own.
There are two things there are three things that come to me. First of all, hunger. And honestly, in New York State, compared to other places, the way we handle hunger is really great. Although when politicians come to my door, I always give them lectures, and I give them copies of my book when they don't mention hunger. So they already know if they're going to come and knock on my door, say something about hunger right away and get it out of the way. But that's important. But housing and childcare.
Yeah. Housing, of all the fear-mongering the right does about safety, I think that if people don't have stable homes, you don't have safety. I mean, you need to know where your home is. That is the first step, Your children need to know where they're coming home to, that you were going to have the same home tomorrow, that you don't have to wake up worrying about where you're going to sleep. So, I mean, that is trauma. And I don't think that such a level of trauma makes us safe. For us to have true safety, people need to be housed, and it needs to be stable, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be dignified. People shouldn't be ashamed of where they live. Right now, a lot of how we think of affordable housing are in many cases not places people are necessarily proud to live in. Like, this is your home. You need to feel a sense of belonging and sense of pride where you live. And then childcare, like you said, is part of a stable home, and childcare especially is a very sexist issue, because if a family can't figure out childcare, you can be pretty certain that it's the mother whose life is going to have to adjust to account for that.
Absolutely.
So if we expect mothers to have a shot at a career or income security, that is not maybe in many cases even single mothers. But if you expect mothers to be independent, to have income security, to have their health care attached to their job, childcare needs to be in the picture. So yeah, it is I find and a lot of sexism, racism, these are, at the end of the day, they all become very economic issues, and economy is how people survive, how people live. So it's where everything is sort of ultimately connected. But yeah, so New York State does have a bill that was recently introduced by another DSA elected state senator, Jabari Brisport, that's for a universal childcare program. Of course, I think that it's not going to be easy to win that, but the conversation has been started, and starting the conversation is always an important step. And I think that, in our district, I think childcare is an issue because there's a shortage of people that you can even hire to, take care of children. And many people are not even getting paid enough to simply afford to live here. So on top of that, childcare, so it's I think it's one of the basic things that factors into what you would consider a stable home is childcare as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you've got healthcare and mental health.
Well, mental health is another subject that is incredible.
Right.
I get it's very large, and there just doesn't seem to be on the national level any kind of a comprehensive plan or attention or whatever. And you bring it down to the state and the local level, it's still a serious problem.
Yeah.
So you do, as you go into Albany, you do have a handful, or maybe you have a bucket full of problems.
Right. The list is getting longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're going to be running around from tea party to tea party, because you're going to be having problems that you do have to discuss, and you're trying to bring solutions to these problems with the mentality of an activist.
Right.
And you're also, as far as I can tell, you do have a kind of a progressive streak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if there is an option to address something at the root level, it should be addressed at the root level, because we have become too accustomed to doing band-aid solutions to everything. But at some point, and now it's starting to fall apart, if you put too many band-aids. So I think, you saying an activist approach or progressive streak, I think for me that really means if an option is on the table that gets to the bottom of the issue, that's where we should go. Because I think that as politicians, I think people are it feels easier to just commit to a band-aid solution. It's less stressful. And there is a little bit of anxiety attached to doing something bigger, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be in terms of favorability from people, in terms of donations or whatever, in terms of your allies or whatever. But we need to start being serious about allocating some space to addressing things at their root cause, because right now it's tilted too much in the other direction.
Right, and so that's something that you and your office members will bring to the voters.
Yeah, and so I tend to, because the thing is, in Albany, the chances of a bill passing is organizing. If you've introduced a bill, you are expected to go around building support for it, right? But obviously you can't do that for every bill, because there's too many bills. There's thousands of bills, right? So if I have to pick a priority, if there's 5 bills on the same topic, I'm probably going to pick the one that will get us to closer to solving it at the root issue, rather than a short-term solution that's going to take an equal amount of effort and sometimes even the same amount of money. So we spend a lot of money on half measures, and because we have to do the half measures over and over again, I think it must turn out to be more expensive than if you had just done it right the first time.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Once you are elected, I'm hopeful that you will figure out ways to communicate with your voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
With your residents.
Yeah.
Even the ones that voted for somebody else.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I think that ideally, of course it depends on, there's only so many hours in the day, so it depends on what I'm able to do. But ideally, I would not like to have a pattern where it's re-election time and then I come out of nowhere and start campaigning. I would like to be able to be in constant touch with the constituents throughout the year. And I think that's kind of an advantage of running a movement campaign, is that I'm hoping that some of the volunteers who are campaigning for us will also be interested in doing issue-based campaigning, and I think they will be. For example, we are in the middle of planning a canvas in Kingston that is not just about our campaign, but it's about a tenant bill that passed, and that there are hearings coming up, and it affects tenants in just a few buildings, and we're trying to go to those buildings and let them know about their rights and what's happening. So that's an example of an issue-based campaigning or canvassing that I hope, as an elected, I'll have, capacity to run those through the office, because I think it is important to organize all year round and not just around election. People need to know all year round what's happening and what you're doing for them.
And I think when you do that, that also has effect of not only keeping you grounded with the residents, but I think it helps to realize that it's not such a futile effort.
Yes, yeah.
Many people now in this country, not just here, but everywhere, feel like the whole thing is futile.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels futile, and the thing is that, none of this is easy. We didn't choose to do this because we thought it was going to be easy. We chose to do this precisely because we knew it was going to be hard and that we were up for it. You have to know that going in, that you're signing up for something quite difficult. When I was running in the primary, sometimes people would tell me, "Wow, you're really in an uphill battle," and I would joke that is why. It's the only battle worth fighting is an uphill battle, because, why do the easy shortcuts? Like, the real problems are going to be difficult to solve, and that's why it needs all our energy and effort.
Well, that's true. The easy shortcuts are what get us in the mess we're in,
Yes.
So it's time for the uphill battles.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
That's where we are, especially when you start dealing with climate control.
Yeah. And not to say that the priorities that have immediate impact on people are not important. They are. Bills or budget priorities, or any kind of program that helps people immediately, they are helpful, but not if there's nothing for the long term. So it needs to be both. I'm not saying that we only need to think about big picture stuff. I'm saying we need to think about both, because I do think that the broader long-term goals are forgotten in favor of only short-term goals.
And of course, driving back and forth and running back and forth to Albany. Of course, you don't do that every day. You do that certain times of the year.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do have a friend whose job is in Albany, and he commutes to Albany all the time, every day. Every working day. So but it will be, most of the work will be in the district.
Actually, there are a lot of people in this area that work in Albany.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you think about it, the commute from Woodstock to Albany is a beautiful commute.
Yeah.
If you take the same commute in the Washington, D.C. metro area, it's a disaster. And people do that every day for 30 years,
Yeah.
They don't get to enjoy the Hudson Valley, and all they see is the bumper to bumper, which is a mess.
Yeah. And from Woodstock, it's even closer from our house. If I remember correctly, I think it's like an hour and a half, maybe.
That's not far.
Yeah. Well, slightly, an hour and 15, I want to say. But from here, it's even closer, yeah.
It's not far.
Yeah.
So what is your plan now for the rest of your time?
Yeah, so we have a very intensive schedule. So Fridays are technically my day off to rest and recover, which is why I'm here. This is how I rest, by just talking to people. And then Saturdays I do a lot of showing up at public events, meetings, And then Sunday every Sunday we have our big canvas. We usually aim for 700 to 1,000 doors in those big canvases. And then Monday we have a phone bank that I do with our volunteers, but also then Monday the recruitment plan for the next week starts, you know. So all day I work on recruitment with our campaign manager, you know, doing comms, doing social media posts, doing emails. And then Mondays and Thursday we've been doing phone banks. We reached a lot of people through that. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday we also have canvases. So we're doing a lot. We are averaging, I think, over 1,000 people attempted per week, you know. I mean, easily over 1,000 people attempted per week, yeah.
Wow. And so you have 30 some odd days, so that's what, 4 weeks?
Yeah, so we're just gonna do more of the same, and we're probably gonna scale up, like try to recruit more people, but also we might have to close it. Usually the last week before the election, we do something every day. We'll probably do a rally like we did last time to do a big canvas. But yeah, and then on November 9th, I'll be turning my phone off and going to bed for 1 month.
Well, listen, if somebody has questions, how can they reach you?
So yeah, on our website is sarahana4assembly.com. It has a phone number as well as the email address, and it goes to our team.
And
Yeah.
so there's someone there to answer the
Yes.
questions.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to get involved in some last-minute canvassing,
On the website, there's a link called Volunteer. It's packed with options of what you can do. So,
Wow.
So this Sunday we are going to New Paltz. On Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the following Sunday, we're doing all New Paltz. We haven't been to New Paltz for the general election yet, and we are hoping altogether in those days to hit over 2,000 doors.
wow,
So it's a very ambitious plan.
wow.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after the election, you've made all these contacts.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I have re-canvassed people I met during the primary, and everybody, I remember them, they remember me. You know, it's great. It's like meeting old friends.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is truly wonderful. Well, Sarahana, it's been wonderful to have you with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that you can come back more than once next year.
Yes.
Because I want to know how an activist works.
Right. You want some updates on how it's going.
I absolutely do. And if you don't win, I don't care, because I know you're going to be doing other things.
Right.
It's not going to stop
Right.
just because you didn't win the election. Although I do feel, because you do have a charisma that people enjoy. And of course that is the charisma of the activist.
Right.
That's not the charisma of a greasy politician. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very, very much, Ellen. Ellen is going to be taking Sarahana's show on the road. So we are very, very happy. And thank you so much, Sarahana.
Thank you.